Great. Well, welcome everyone. It's really wonderful to have our group here today, and also want to welcome those who are joining us by Zoom. We have family members, Civic Scholar alumni, and other supporters who are Zooming in from around the country. I'm here to just offer a brief introduction to the Gephardt Institute and to this event, and then pass off to the people we're really here to hear from. For those I don't know, my name is Stephanie Kurtzman, and it's my honor to serve as Executive Director for the Gephardt Institute for Civic and Community Engagement. And just a word to help put in context the Gephardt Institute. What we focus on is fostering student learning, participation, and impact in civic life. And the ideal outcome of our efforts to do this is when we foster civic leaders who are prepared with the knowledge, the skills, the experience, and of course the lifelong commitment to lead positive change in the civic environment. We know how much change is needed. We know how fraught the civic environment is locally as well as nationally, and how much work there is to be done, and that we need both passionate and skilled young leaders like our Civic Scholars. So here we have the Civic Scholars program. This is one of our flagship programs at the Gephardt Institute, and to date we have prepared 151 students and alumni for future civic leadership. We have 16 seniors who have spent 2 years together, combining academic learning, civic learning and dialogue, and listening and experiential learning to develop their skills and their preparation as future civic leaders. One hallmark of the program that you'll hear more about is the Civic Summer, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But before I do that, I want to thank everyone for being here. We've got so many wonderful people here, from our junior Civic Scholars who are here to listen, half of our seniors who are presenting tonight, the other half who are presenting tomorrow night, many of our greatest supporters and donors to the program, and an exceptional team of instructors who have guided the students through the process. So thank you all for coming, and now it's my pleasure to introduce the other Stephanie Weiskopf, who's one of the co-instructors for the seniors, and she'll tell you more about the Civic Summer and what we'll be doing here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I do recognize that I stand in the way of hearing from the real stars of tonight, but I did want to make sure that the hard work that they've put in to get to this moment is sort of captured, because as Stephanie described, Civic Scholars being a 2-year experience is unlike any other experience you might get at WashU, of spending 4 class credits together all last year, almost wrapping up our 5th credit, which is Tuesday mornings at 9. So if you can imagine waking up that early as a senior, they almost always do. But really how we have spent our time together over the past year and a half has been, our first fall was sort of foundational. So we actually reviewed a ton of definitions of civic and community engagement, deconstructed them, and rewrote one that was a shared and understood concept from our cohort. Then in spring semester, we basically ask these scholars to be grant writers, and they are tasked with writing averaged around like 16, 18 pages of what you might submit post-college to get grant funding for a similar type project. Their funding is already guaranteed. So we already know the outcome of that, right, in terms of where they are headed for that summer, but it was a really incredible practice of understanding how to have grounded research and framework into approaching community engagement with health and ethics in mind, incorporating evaluation and how you'll know your impact was experienced, and how to close the loop. So when you exit communities, what does that look like? And many of them will speak to tonight how their work has continued ongoing, probably beyond what they imagined. For the Civic Summer, of our 16 scholars, which you'll hear from 8 of them tonight, we had 14 of them choose to spend their summer in St. Louis, which I think is pretty remarkable given the history of the program. I think it probably speaks to spending their first year and a half on Zoom, and a real committed investment to being in a community that they didn't quite have access to their first 2 years as students. Beyond that, 5 of them actually partnered with entities affiliated with WashU. which I think is also unique and different and shows an investment to their university community in ways that you'll hear about tonight. Some common civic passion areas. So our most represented is education, then we have ability, our data nerds, which you'll hear from tonight. But really they range, way beyond that. And it's really, I think, the power of the Civic Scholars community when you get to see 16 people with such unique passions and how they've chosen to spend their summer. So all of their summers looked distinctly different, although the framework was shared. And it's really hard to capture that experience in a 5-minute presentation, which we've asked them to do tonight. So you'll probably just hear a taste of what their summer was. Over the past decade, we've changed the framework from Civic Project to Civic Summer to really speak to and center sustainability in the way in which we're building relationships with communities. So not a community to be fixed, but a community to invest in for at least one summer. So that are some of the themes that you will likely hear weaved in between all of our scholars this evening in a format presentation style called PechaKucha, which comes from some Japanese architects, and it's meant to represent chit-chat. So a real challenge to be brief, and the slides advance every 20 seconds. So I also will admit that due to the pandemic, I think we're still getting used to in-person events. So do I think this is going to go perfect? No. And I'm okay with that. But how it should go in an ideal world is the slides will advance automatically. We'll start with our first 4 scholars, which you can follow on the program. Then we'll invite those first 4 back up for people to ask them questions, either specifically or collective as a group. It's totally random. It's not even in alphabetical order, so don't look too deeply into it. It was probably just about the words in their sentence and what looked the best. And then we will transition to the last 4 and then do some closing remarks and continued reception over on my right. So with that, those are all my things. 5 minutes, 20 seconds, we all know. So that's what we have in store for you. And again, just want to express my deepest gratitude to our Civic Scholars, those who are in attendance and those who are joining virtually. I know that their success is not singular to them. It's really the investment that their champions have made in them. And so I see many of you in the room who are those people to this community. So thank you so much for being here. So our first presenter for this evening is Sarah B. So we have 2 Sarahs. I sometimes can't imagine you just being called Sarah because it's always Sarah B or Sarah N. But our first presenter is Sarah Buchanan, who's a Fox Clark Civic Scholar, wrapping up her time as a WashU undergraduate, but also in her first year as a student at the Brown School of Social Work. Sarah's project focused on expanding literacy through the development of a library and volunteer program at the St. Louis Juvenile Detention Center in order to reduce recidivism, break cycles of incarceration, and disrupt the school-to-prison pipeline. So I will invite Sarah up here, and I will advance the slide. I think it's already on.
Did you know that 85% of incarcerated youth in Missouri operate at a functionally low literacy rate? This means that 85% will never have a chance to graduate high school. 85% will never have a chance to get a high-paying job. And 85% will likely spend their time trapped in cycles of incarceration. I started volunteering at the St. Louis Juvenile Detention Center in 2019. We call it the JDC. I worked in the library rec program, but the library really wasn't functional. And when I returned in 2022, the program coordinators, Ms. Nikisha Fortenberry and Ms. Tiffany Johnson, asked me to help them revitalize the library. And the library renovation project was born. We started off with a really gloomy, kind of dirty classroom that was full of boxes and old shelves. The coordinators and I planned to clean it out, paint, build new shelves, and put new materials in the library. And it took multiple people at the facility to make this project work. It really does take a village to complete this project. Everyone in the facility was involved, from the youth themselves to the smiling faces at the front desk, to the security guards, and further to the surrounding community and the donors. One of the most prominent stories of the village involvement surfaced when we had to replace shelves in the library. These shelves were made of old metal, and they had become pretty dangerous as they were broken and could be used as weapons, thrown, and used to cut other people. Additionally, they couldn't hold up the books, so we needed to buy new shelves. My original idea was to hire U Trucking to move them out of here. I gave them a call, and they agreed to come and get them at a low price, but unfortunately, after a few months of calling and calling, they were unresponsive and wouldn't help us. So after my frustration lasted, I realized that the shelves were steel and likely could be scrapped for a little extra cash. So after telling Miss Johnson about this idea, she thought we can use the court vans to move them to a steel scrapping area. But we really didn't know how to go about this. However, we got lucky that one of the security guards at the facility, Officer Lovelace, had experience in construction and scrapping. So he came up and helped us with the deconstruction process and helped us carry the steel to the vans, and we drove them there together. Miss Johnson and Miss Fortenberry and I went to the scrapyard and threw them in piles ourselves. And that steel came out to a whopping 1,260 pounds. We were able to use the extra money we earned combined with the money that we saved from firing U Trucking to buy an extra tablet for the facility, which was very serendipitous because we needed a specific iPad for the stuff that they needed for check-in and check-out and couldn't use the other tablets, and the money added up to what we needed. So from there, we started to fill the shelves with books. We spent a lot of time painting, building new shelves, and stocking them. Ms. Fortenberry and Ms. Johnson worked so hard to get this done, and through the process, we became jacks of many trades, from painting to building to even scrapping steel. After this renovation, we stocked the library with books. The St. Louis community, the WashU community, my Alabama community, and beyond all helped to get over 1,600 titles to the JDC. The process of cataloging and labeling them took forever, but I really couldn't complain with the amount of books that we got. The library space came a long way, and I am so grateful for the village that made it possible. I learned so much about the value of teamwork and collaboration in overcoming these obstacles. I'm grateful to have been able to immerse myself in this community. And through this collaboration, we took this gloomy, uninviting space into a refreshed and welcoming space for the youth that are eager to use. The rugs and the beanbags that you see on the screen are actually picked out by the youth themselves in an effort to keep them involved in the library. They also picked out a bunch of books as well, and we got comic books for them. Since the renovation, the library has been receiving more book requests from the youth than ever before. And we hope to use the space as a way to further increase access to literature and education. In an effort to continue this work, I'm also starting a club here at WashU for volunteers to continue to go into the JDC. We're currently working on finding a faculty sponsor and working on our constitution. The club hopes to be able to bring back the library rec program, which is a board game program that the youth really love and want me to bring back. Additionally, the Brown School has encouraged me to continue my work at the JDC through my practicum and has asked me to build a practicum for them to continue to invite Brown School students into the space to work with the programming department and help sustain the library alongside the youth. It is my hope that this will help bring that 85% down to 0. Thank you.
Job, and I can't imagine going first. Can I just say that's a lot of pressure, so congrats, Sarah. So next up we have A.K. Blanks, who's a Fox Clark Civic Scholar from Greenville, South Carolina, has many minors that you can read on that piece of paper. Her project focused on providing both resources and awareness of community presence for those with disabilities on campus, which included a social media campaign, a disability-focused resource guide, and the organization of events in the partnership with the Center for Diversity and Inclusion. So next up we have AK.
As Stephanie just said, my name is AK, and today I'm going to be talking to you about my Civic Summer. The point of my Civic Summer was really just to focus and center in on those on campus that have disabilities, as that's commonly a group that's actually fairly large, but very often left out. So I'm just going to be talking about that, and throughout this presentation, I will be using person-first language as that's my preference. So you might be wondering why. Well, what you can't tell in that picture of me and my dog is that I was born hearing impaired. I wear hearing aids, I read lips, the whole gambit. So I'm very passionate about disability rights, disability activism, but I've never been passionate about being a person with disabilities. I've always kind of hid my hearing aid and tried not to talk about it. So enough about me, let's talk about my project. So it's about 3 pieces: accessible awareness, accessible resources, and accessible dialogue. So I met with the CDI, which I will get more into later, and we kind of talked about the ways that we thought we could empower this community and bring them together on campus. And we thought these 3 ways kind of holistically looked at the problem that exists and tackled it. So first we have accessible awareness. So as Stephanie mentioned, I did a social media campaign through the CDI. Our idea was that a lot of students on campus, both those with disabilities and those without, didn't know that the CDI had resources or was a space for them. And I found that out in a poll I ran during my junior year. So the idea of this was to kind of just show them while they were home during their summer who the CDI is, who works there, the things they do, the resources they offer, to make it more comfortable so that when they came back on campus, they could walk in that space and feel like they belonged there and know that they did. So this is just the social media page and some of the campaigns that ran. And then that ties very closely into the second idea that we had, which was accessible resources. So there are hundreds of resources out there for those with disabilities, but it's really hard to find them all. And the CDI has a lot of these self-study guides on their website, but there was not a specific one about disability in education, specifically higher ed. So that's what I worked on throughout the summer. It's just the first picture of it, but it's a very long, long resource guide. These are snapshots of it. Don't try to read it right now. It's a lot of words. But it's housed on the CDI's website and will be there for the long term. It'll be updated every year and is a great resource for students when they come looking for resources, for those that are trying to help their friends, for teachers, RAs, honestly anyone. So then that leads us to accessible dialogue. So when talking with the CDI, we realized that there was this gap between those with disabilities knowing that they could walk into the CDI, and we wanted to bridge that. So we decided to have this event called Disability Chat and Chew, and I reached out to those students with disabilities asking them who would want to talk. Would anyone be comfortable enough to come speak? And a lot of them wanted to. So we were able to have this event, and it was really cool because it started that conversation that had been lacking. We left the room, it took 30 minutes longer than we thought it would, starting to talk about changes, things that could be brought to the institution. Faculty was there, and it was wonderful, and we're hoping to be able to do more of these next semester as well. So you might be wondering how. Those were a lot of pieces, one summer. I also had a job and was studying for the LSAT, and I wonder this as well. And I have realized that the only reason that this was possible or even got off the drawing board was because of partnership and community from the beginning of my project to the very end to even keeping it going now. So when looking at partnership, as I stated, I partnered closely with the CDI. During my junior year, I went in and had all of these large ideas of things I was going to change and way I was going to make this campus better. And they were like, realistically, let's tone it down. But at the same time, keep pushing. So we met multiple times. They had a lot of different ideas. But most specifically, Dr. Williams was my go-to, and the CDI was there all summer, met with me every week. Even when she was on vacation, showed up in the Zoom room, answered emails at night when I'd be freaking out, made sure I hit every deadline, and was just always pushing me, and still is helping me plan events. Would not have been able to do my project without that. And on top of it, I have community in general. So I chose this picture from the disability rights movement because I think that really symbolizes the activism that's going on campus today. So as I mentioned earlier, I really turned to the community of those with disabilities, asking them questions like, yes, I have a disability, but that does not mean that I know other people's experiences. So it's wonderful to be able to go to them to get feedback and pushback and ideas that I couldn't have come up with on my own. But on top of that, I also turned to my community of friends and family that don't have disabilities and was able to ask them questions of how does this come across? How would you say this? And my point in doing that is because I realized for a movement to get off the ground and to change things, everyone needs to be involved. And this was a crucial piece, and the accountability piece played by this group was huge. So my final thoughts. So I am extremely proud of my project, but more than anything, I'm thankful for those that helped it become what it is. I did not do this on my own at all. I'm also very proud to say now that I'm proud of my disability, and I'll talk about it in groups, and that's a weird space. So just thank you to all of you. That's all.
Awesome, thanks, AK. So next up, we have Barry Henaku, who's a Fox Clark Civic Scholar from Chicago. I should have mentioned this earlier. So our two civics who were not in St. Louis was Barry, who spent his summer in Chicago, and Sarah N., who spent their summer in DC. So our one out-of-towner for today. He's majoring in mathematics and classics, and his project focused on collecting narratives from people of color in STEM. Over the summer, he interviewed academics from undergraduates to professors in an effort to highlight their stories and learn about civic engagement in higher education. I'm going to have it just not be muted.
So hi, I'm Barry, and my story begins with Professor Ed Goins. And so I first heard of this article when I was in high school, and I felt a number of complex emotions. I felt fear about going into this field, inspiration, empathy, and most of all confusion about why he was the only one and why the community was so small. But it turns out this wasn't only a problem with mathematics. I'm also a classicist, and classics was facing its own reckoning. And classics is rooted in whiteness, but to me, it seemed like the problem was a deeper thread. It seemed like higher education needed to come to terms with how to make its space more inclusive for others to participate in. And so, where's the problem? So, well, first, 12.3% of the US population is Black, but a much smaller population of the US, a much smaller population of faculty are people of color. And so academia is not a meritocracy, contrary to popular belief, and scientific talent is distributed equally. And so I wanted to know what ways can I patch this leaky pipeline. And so I spoke to Federico Ardila, who's most known for the Ardila's axioms, and these are ways to cultivate diversity in the spaces that you're interested in. And so these should not be revolutionary ideals, but considering they should be common sense, but considering our current practices, it's obvious that this is not the case. And so for my summer project, I wanted to parallel the work done by MathHad. So MathHad essentially tracks and identifies mathematicians of the African diaspora. And so I thought the key to fix this problem would be mentorship and essentially highlighting the narratives from people of color in STEM. And so to begin, I started with the mentorship component. And I gathered 5 of my most talented friends to do this. And so I want to inspire the love of STEM that my mentors had done for me. And so we eagerly began developing projects in different disciplines for people to participate in. And we petitioned local groups to invite students to join. And this manifested itself in the Project for Better Education. So this would be a one-on-one mentoring program for students where we led them and guided them through projects. But it turned out to be extremely difficult to find students. I mean, I was absolutely shocked. Students didn't want to spend their summer doing mathematics. Can you believe it? But I learned a lot of lessons in planning, and I pivoted to my next project, which was the STEM with Color, where my goal was to collect narratives from people and highlight them and sort of learn what ways people were engaging civically in the mathematics community. And I wanted to highlight the stories of others. And so this was the podcast that I made. And I was helped by these 4 wonderful women. And so these women run the network for minorities in mathematical sciences. And I don't think professors on vacation over the summer are too excited to hear from students, but these people helped me connect with a lot of people and find people who had interesting stories that I could tell. And so I thank them for all of their efforts in this project. And so during the project, I found a number of pockets of communities that I'd be excited for working at. So not surprisingly, it turns out HBCUs were like the highest producers of doctoral students. And so I interviewed these 4 people from Morehouse, and they showed me the different ways that history had developed and like how African Americans had come to be more prevalent. And I also was invited to participate in CARMS next year. I missed this because I was in Chicago, but CARMS was a conference that was started in the early 2000s. And originally, it was a very small community, but because of the people here, they've raised the community to be much larger. So this is one of the examples of things that I intend to participate in the future and later. And so since then, I've been invited to attend a number of conferences. This conference is not CARMS, but it's the Field of Dreams conference. And I came here, this was in the fall, where these were a couple of undergraduates who I interviewed. And I got to meet them at these conferences where I was presenting my work over the summer in a presentation there. And I also got to go to another conference where I also met a large community. And so the goal moving forward now for my project is to sort of spread my work at conferences and also engage with the community that I feel like entering in the future, which is maybe the mathematics one. And so since then, I've been excited. I've been since excited to meet these people. And I'd like to thank all the people that I met from my journey. And so this is a small snippet of all of the people that I've interviewed, but they've taught me all insightful lessons through my process. I would be in debt, sorry. And I'm definitely in debt to them about all the insights they showed me. And so I think it would be remiss of me if I didn't invite you to listen to the podcast. So a quick Google search, we can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Overcast. Of course, the fall semester has become busy, so I only do have 2 episodes out. But I do plan to create more episodes later on, and I hope you'll take a listen and tell me what you think of the podcast. So thank you.
So for our last Civic Scholar in this first section of 4, and then we'll invite all 4 of them back up for questions from the audience, is Akshay Govindan, who's a Fox Clark Civic Scholar from St. Louis, Missouri. His project involved working with the Brown School Social Policy Institute to conduct social policy research in 2 areas: understanding the impact of the pandemic on non-English speakers and investigating the effect of the Choice Neighborhoods Initiative Housing Redevelopment Program on youth outcomes.
Yes, so when I was kind of planning my civics summer, I knew I wanted to do something at the intersection of research and community-focused work. And as I kind of showed here, I thought of these at the time as 2 different spheres. Research existing sort of in a vacuum, with the output being papers and publishing and at universities, and community-focused work kind of occurring on the ground and in communities. So to kind of bridge those 2 together, I wanted to find a partner that did both of those things. And fittingly here at WashU, the Social Policy Institute at the Brown School does just that, doing data-centric but also community-focused work that kind of ties those 2 spheres together. And while at the Brown School and at the Social Policy Institute, I worked on 2 different projects, which I'll kind of go over today in some detail. The first one being looking at the impact of the Choice Neighborhoods Initiative in St. Louis. So this is an initiative that's currently being run by the Department of Housing and Urban Development to revitalize neighborhoods across the country and cities. And one of the cities that got a grant was St. Louis. So we kind of were wanting to look at, through a funded project, the impact of housing redevelopment in the Choice Neighborhoods Initiative on youth outcomes and in particular education. So it was kind of unknown how these 2, or how housing redevelopment and factors in housing redevelopment impact educational outcomes. So that's why I kind of put this question mark to show that we were looking at what factors sort of determine the outcomes and how those kind of can be linked to housing redevelopment. And what was really cool about this project was the incorporation of Urban Strategies Incorporated, which is a community organization that kind of played a major role in the oversight of C&I in St. Louis. But they were also part of the planning process for the project and kind of downstream analysis in the project. So seeing this community organization kind of being involved directly in the oversight and planning of the project was really cool, and sort of bridging the gap between community work, but also with research kind of in an academic setting. So my role in the project in particular was sort of to investigate the factors and kind of the theoretical factors as to why housing redevelopment, both on a micro scale, like in households, and on a macro scale in neighborhoods, can sort of have an effect on youth outcomes. And that's sort of in progress now, and we're working towards writing a theory paper that is to be submitted soon. The second project I worked on was looking at the socioeconomic impact of COVID, in particular the impact on non-English speakers. So this survey conducted by the SPI was a really large survey conducted over the course of 2020 to 2021 across the country, asking a wide range of questions ranging from social, emotional, mental, and physical well-being. And here's kind of a summary of the overview of the survey. So it started in the spring of 2020, like April 2020, all the way to more than a year after, with roughly 2,000 to 5,000 participants per wave. So using this data set, I wanted to address a few questions, namely the problem of language barriers and seeing how language barriers have a big impact both on access to social, legal, and health services. I wanted to use this data set to sort of answer those questions. And importantly, the pandemic really exacerbated those issues. And this is sort of a subset of the news articles about those issues in the pandemic, but we can kind of see how language barriers that were exacerbated by the pandemic led to problems with testing, getting access to testing, but also in care and navigating the medical space in general for non-English speakers. So I wanted to investigate a few different areas, and the first that I'll kind of focus on today was the gig economy. And the gig economy is roughly defined as on-demand labor, on-demand jobs that are kind of temporary, freelance, and those were really important during the pandemic when obviously things were very virtual, in-person kind of work was scarce, and the gig economy played a big role, as I'll show, in the non-English speaking population. So kind of using the data set, I want to ask this question, and here's some of the results, kind of an overview. So here we can kind of see, if we look at the survey responses in terms of whether participants answered yes or no, whether they work in the gig economy, there's an enrichment, sort of an increase in Spanish speakers, the green color, in the yes category, showing that Spanish speakers kind of rely more on the gig economy than English speakers. And if we stratify that by whether gig economy was their main job, the trend is sort of more striking and the disparity is more striking in terms of Spanish speakers relying on gig jobs as their main job in the yes category. And further, if we split it down by whether this was kind of a source of high importance for their income, the trend even becomes more striking, with there being sort of a gradient as you go from the income being really important. There's a enrichment of Spanish speakers in that category, suggesting that kind of as you go from the income being more important to less important, there are more Spanish speakers as you go, and less Spanish speakers in the low important categories, so sort of suggesting that Spanish speakers really rely heavily on the gig economy for their income. And so kind of going back to the first slide, I wanted to just summarize the main takeaway of my summer, which was that research and community focus work kind of exist, or rather coexist, and sort of a back and forth process where research feeds into community work, and community work kind of supplies an infrastructure and foundation for research. Thank you.
Going together. So this is our trial year of separating the two, or separating the cohort into half. So our first four went. So any questions from folks in the audience for either one or all of our Civic Scholars? Yes, thanks, Bob.
So you talk about language barriers. How about cultural competence within language? People's understanding of what you're saying, the same words in different languages, but they mean different things.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a really important point you bring up. And I guess given like the source of the data, like the type of data in terms of the survey responses, that question wasn't explicitly asked, but I think that would be a really cool thing to kind of investigate on more of a qualitative standpoint, like interviewing respondents and kind of seeing what their ideas of the meaning of certain words, for example, in a medical context or in general. But yeah, given like the nature of the data, I think it was kind of hard to look at that in particular, but definitely would be interesting to follow up on that.
Yeah, because in some countries people say yes when in other countries they say no to the same question.
Yeah.
And so it gets a little complicated when it comes to the competency of the culture you come from as well as the language you speak.
Definitely. Thanks.
Sarah, congratulations on trying to make your program sustainable. I think at the end of your presentation, you said you're in search for a faculty sponsor. Is that right?
Yes, if you
What
know
exactly
anybody.
do you need?
So I need somebody who is faculty at WashU that would be willing to partner with the club to sign an agreement with us and have occasional meetings and support with us so we can get recognized by the student union and by campus life. So again, if you know anybody, my email is sarahb@woostol.
Genesis?
Yes, this question is for Barry. Thank you so much for sharing the great work that you did over the summer with researching and connecting with other scholars in the academic area of math. I'm curious to know what long-term trends do you forecast seeing in the recruitment of people of color into the academic discipline of math?
Yeah, I definitely see it's trending very positively upward, mainly because it's sort of like a rising tide effect, where like the more people there are in the field, the more people they will mentor to be into the field. So there's already been like a significant amount of growth, and there's been a lot of dedication to like undergraduate programs that are sort of like dedicated to increasing representation in sort of the doctoral sciences. I guess our only competition would be like, the recruiting from other like tech jobs. So that's the only sort of like reason I see why there wouldn't be a direct increase in sort of like underrepresented minorities in like these STEM topics. But I think overall in STEM, we'll definitely see an increase in that sort of aspect.
Cassie, did I see your hand? Okay.
So Sarah, I apologize if it's the beginning of your presentation, but the student move-out donation was a source of books for your program. And so this isn't really a question, but it's an offer to continue that as a resource both for books and then also games that students leave behind. We'd love to be a source for your center.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Yeah. The student move out, actually in my final write-up, I believe that we received 250 books from you guys, which was amazing. The 250 books that were put into the library. So thank you so much.
That's really cool. We have one more question, no pressure. If not, we'll transition on. Yeah, Stephanie.
When you think back to what you imagined for your civic summer at the point that you were applying to the program, to where you are now, that you can reflect on your civic summer, what did you learn about what is necessary and possible when you're trying to achieve civic impact? That's for any of you.
Do you want to do like a line? Volunteering, of course, Sarah.
Sure, of course. Well, I think in my speech I talked a lot about collaboration and community, and I think the most important thing was really, like I said, the village and making sure that the community was really at the center, because I'm not sure if the kids would have been as excited about the library if we hadn't asked them what they wanted to see, or we hadn't asked them what books they wanted, because I mean, who would be excited if they weren't involved? And then seeing the value of each person at the JDC in making that project happen, like Officer Lovelace, the people at the front desk who always knew to let me in at a certain time. Just collaborating with community was so important, and one thing that I'll carry with me forever.
Yeah, I hate to copy that, but I will continue on with the community idea. I didn't realize how important it was to partner with someone and be in community with an organization that has knowledge and also power. So for me, like I said, yes, I could have made a resource guide, but the impact that it's going to have would not be near what I hope it does if I hadn't partnered with the CDI and if they hadn't been willing to let me work with them. So I think, you can have all these great ideas and a passion, but really finding an organization that's doing the work and has the resources and the guidance that you don't have on your own is crucial.
I hate to further copy, but just echoing what Sarah and AK said, I think at first when I was planning my summer, I wanted to sort of do like a standalone, like by myself, collect my own data, and I think just knowing what's feasible versus what is practical and possible. Like the SBI, like AK said, provided sort of infrastructure, and they had sort of, I guess, power and credence. So the fact of just like disseminating your data or your results, even on like the SBI website, is just so much easier than, or so much, it can reach a larger audience in a much easier way than just doing something on your own.
Yeah, and so like I think sort of echoing that point as well, I think one of the biggest differences was I feel like I had a very naive definition of like civic engagement when I was entering. And so like the largest thing that I learned was sort of like getting a lot of information about what other people were doing in the spheres that I was interested in entering. And so I feel like knowing what other people were doing sort of like leads me to like know what is feasible, what is possible with help, and like what you can learn to do. And so that was, I think, the biggest shift for me.
Well, thanks all. Do you guys want to pass off the mics to Racquel? So I'm now going to pass the mic to my co-MC, who also happens to be my co-instructor extraordinaire, Dwayne T. James. So Dwayne was one of the co-instructors for the class of 2022 Civic Scholars, now class of 2023, and class of 2024. So I'm just saying he knows what he's doing. So you are in good hands for the second half.
I can't do anything. Thank you, everyone. You are good. All right. My name is Dwayne T. James. I am one of the co-facilitators. So with that, we'll keep this moment going and this movement happening. So with that, we'll have Racquel come up. She's a Fox Clark Civic Scholar from Oak Park, Illinois. Her project focused on psychological interventions to improve student outcomes in math classes. Everyone knows I love math. Including designing and leading a summer math program, researching and implementing psychological interventions, and creating a website for educators to use the same tools in their own classroom. So with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, so like you just heard, I'm a math major. So that's what I kind of wanted to center my summer on, because math is not a popular subject. Everyone says it's their hardest class, they don't know it, and I hear a lot of times that I'm not a math person, but you don't hear that about other subjects. And to me, that really stands out because math is something we use every day and everyone uses no matter what career path you take. And so I really wanted to focus my summer on kind of figuring out how this could be improved in classrooms for students to really improve their math learning and get to the root of like why this is even happening. And so to do that, I partnered with the Thomas Dunn Learning Center in St. Louis, and I did a free like 5-week program called Gain a Gift Card with Math in the Real World. So it was centered on shopping, because shopping is something that involves a lot of math and that everyone uses in life, no matter where you are. And so that is what the theme of my summer camp was, to kind of get students to realize a theme that like math is used everywhere. And so I really took the first part of my summer to plan out an effective program, and so a lot of it was meeting with professors who had expertise in this. So one professor really taught me about psychological interventions that could be done to improve student outcomes in learning and math, and also talking about cultural pedagogy and having culturally relevant pedagogy to get buy-in with students. And so a lot of that included having discussions. And so even though it was math and there was math that was done, a lot of it was just having discussions about math. And this was one of the qualitative measures I had about students to track their progress. And then I also had quantitative measures, which include this math anxiety self-test that I learned about from one of my professors, which turned out to be a big part of my summer. And I also had a pre and post test of the material I covered, like in relation to shopping, like the sales tax and all that I learned. And so all of these measures were really impactful and helped a lot. And apart from that, I had a few different activities, and so these are pictures from one activity I did that was like taking pictures of anywhere you see math. It was the first activity we did, and so if you look at this might be like random pictures, but you can see like geometry, parallel lines, and all of these show how math is really everywhere around us, and just looking at that can really help students. And a big part of my summer was also writing. A lot of the psychological interventions were writing, which is not common in math classrooms, but it turns out to really improve student outcomes. Just writing about your values or writing a letter to your younger self endorsing like a growth mindset can be really effective and was effective. And so this is like not one of my students, but what it kind of looked like the first day. She was like forced to go there. She didn't want to come to the camp. But by the end was loving it, was so sad when it ended. She's like, this is the last Monday, this is the last Thursday, and all the students really improved on the math anxiety scores, on the qualitative measures of the discussions and all of that. And then I got the opportunity impromptu to go into another camp to kind of have a mini part. It was just a 10-minute lesson to talk with students about how math is everywhere and everywhere around us, and how everyone can use math and everyone does use math more than you realize. And so this kind of inspired my last part of my summer, which was making a website called like Math in the Real World, Psychological Tools for Math Learning. So it's using everything I learned and did this summer and making it accessible for more teachers and educators to use in their own classroom to have an impact on more students. And so it includes all the interventions I did and ways to find more interventions on their own, and also a how I feel about math questionnaire, which is the same questionnaire you saw before, but without anxiety, as that can kind of throw students off. And so I have this adapted version for teachers to use themselves instead of having to make their own. And then I also have a blog section where I talk about my story and what I did over the summer in more detail, and more about the discussions we had. And so the problems a lot of students, the main themes students said were problems in math classes, and easy ways to fix them. So the whole idea was to make it really accessible for teachers to use this website as much as they want, in much detail or not detail that they want, and really have little things that they can actually do in their classrooms. And so I just wanted to refocus on math anxiety, because that's what really is the mental block in these classrooms, and I think this cycle really shows how it can affect a lot of us, and I think it affects most of us in our lives, and it can lead to a lot of trouble in math, even though we all use math and all of us know how to do math. And so my goal in the future is to continue working on this website, going into more schools, connecting with more teachers, doing professional development, and I'm also planning on being a math teacher, so I think this is something I'm going to continually be working on. And I'm also doing research on math anxiety now, so all of it, I think, is a continuous process that I will be like continuously updating on my website. So yes, thank you.
Future hashtag math in the real world. I mean, take a picture and post it on up. Make sure it happens. I like it. All right, next up is Kyra, a Fox Clark Civic Scholar from St. Louis, Missouri. She is majoring in Global and Cultural Studies in the School of Arts and Sciences and minoring in art in the Sam Fox School of Art and Design. Kyra partnered with the International Institute of St. Louis to design and facilitate the Teen Summer Learning Program, a 3-week program focused on improving communication skills and mental well-being for, I'm like, what's going on? All right, mental well-being for immigrants and refugees ages 14 to 21. So with that, I'll turn it over to you.
So yeah, my name is Kyra. Communication and practices of physical and mental well-being. There's a lot to say about this incredible experience. I'm going to do my best to keep in time with the slides, and faces of the students are blurred for confidentiality purposes. Over here. There we go. Okay. I come from a family of Syrian refugees, among other Arab immigrants, and I believe that in the U.S. we have a privilege and a duty to make everyone feel as warm and welcome as we can. My first semester at WashU, I joined the Legacies for Immigrants and Refugees Club and began tutoring youth at the International Institute of St. Louis after-school program. Once COVID hit, many of the students' access to support and their now online classes was cut off. So attending online school requires stable Wi-Fi, access to a device, and most of these students had neither or only one. So I organized a tablet drive through the Institute, wrote an article, and got more involved. There are currently over 100 million forcibly displaced individuals worldwide, which is a record number. Over half of all refugees are under the age of 18. In 2020, nearly 1 in 3 children living outside their countries of birth were child migrants, compared to less than 1 in 20 adults, so that number is striking. And basically, in designing this program, I wanted to do whatever would bring the students the most joy and benefit them the most. So I surveyed students at the after-school program, and they said a topic that they really wanted to focus on was communication. It's really hard to communicate when you don't know the language, you don't know the culture, and so we developed this program. So working within the pre-existing institute framework for summer programs, we created Let's Communicate, which is a program divided into 3 parts to try to cover the 3 bases of the topic of communication. So week 1 was at the heart of what I wanted to do in the first place. Available research shows that self-exploration through creativity is one of the best methods to encourage confidence and communication in refugee youth. So students were provided with journals, we went on nature walks, we did a lot of self-exploration, and students made mood boards to introduce themselves. It was really just about sustaining and building a community, and we did a lot of practices that I learned in the Civic Scholars, actually. So week 2 was about communication with others. Now we got the spaces of communication with ourselves. We did speed interviewing, where students had to tell themselves over and over, tell me about yourself. We learned about cultural introductions around the world. And then the final week, we had a professor from a local college who teaches communication come in and have us do public speaking. We did improvisation, things like the power of no. We had students think about long-term goals. We had a graduation ceremony and went to the zoo. It was a lot of fun, and it was really great to see the progress. So on the last 2 days of camp, we conducted a post-assessment, which is tricky in itself, but the results were really positive. So 100% of students said that the camp helped them practice English with public speaking and meeting friends. 95% said that they gained confidence with English and understanding different cultures. 90% said they improved their communication skills. And one of my favorite statistics is, did you improve your self-confidence? 100% of the students said yes, which was basically the goal of the program in essence. So in that sense, I really felt like we did succeed a little bit. And getting to watch them flourish in real time was really cool. We saw the confidence come out of a lot of students, which was fantastic. So some of my main takeaways include there's a lack of prioritization and funding and general understanding of refugee youth mental health, which might come from this Western culture-dominated field. And something I wish I'd stuck in on more was there's a lot of imposter syndrome going through this program, and I wish I'd stayed true to my ideas a little bit more. So it's not that people don't care about refugee youth, they do, but these institutions are bureaucratic, underfunded, and overworked. So survival is the priority, not necessarily thriving. But a few studies that do exist show that among refugees under 8 years old, 80% experience mental problems going far beyond PTSD. So when I've always thought about who's working with refugee youth, I think about Angelina Jolie, not psychologists. And it makes me wonder if academics just don't see a lot of self-promotion in this work. It's really hard to sustain relationships. There's full confidentiality. You can't release names. The students aren't getting a voice in this research because it's fully confidential. So it's really hard to find research on the subject. And going forward, the refugee crisis isn't going to get any better. With climate disasters on the rise, the Institute for Economics and Peace predicts there will be 1.2 billion displaced persons by 2050, and the US is not immune. So doesn't it seem like we should be placing more importance on the well-being of refugee youth who may soon be leading us and the next generation in survival and teaching about migration? Thank you.
Fabulous. Improving their self-confidence. I like it. All right. Next up, we have Maya, a Fox Clark Civic Scholar from San Francisco, California. Her project engaged with Earth Dance Organic Farm School in Ferguson and aimed to improve food access in neighboring areas. So with that, I'll turn it over to Maya.
Hello, everyone. My name is Maya, and I spent the summer working with Earth Dance Organic Farm School up in Ferguson. And tonight I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about how we can use urban farming to interact with communities in order to improve community health, and also how we can use it to affect systemic change within food systems. Starting with this question, this is a big one. Is it about physical health, mental health? Is it about neighborhood health, family health, or is it a combination of all of the above? This summer I had the chance to really interact with this question, but before I jump into that, I'm going to jump back in time a little bit. So when I was a first year, I joined the Vernon Kumquat, which is WashU's student-run garden, and it was more than just worms and digging in the dirt, although it was definitely a lot of that. This is where I learned about the network of urban farms in St. Louis, and really importantly, when I first learned about the work that Earth Dance was doing. So I reached out to Earth Dance last year with kind of the broad goal of improving community health through equitable access to food. And this is obviously a goal that they had as well. They've been around since 2008. And we quickly identified the Pay What You Can organic farm stand as a space I could plug into with the general goal of using an equitable business model to improve access to food. There was like a lot of ways we worked with this, but these are the two main things I worked on. We created a coupon that could be sent out to the local community in order to raise awareness about the existence of the farm stand, and also a nutrition board, which included nutrition information, cooking tips, and recipe ideas for people who are perhaps encountering this produce for the first time. While we were doing this work, it was really important for us to engage with the local community. So we worked a lot with Earth Dance's outreach committee, which just involved neighbors interested in the work, in order to really tailor our work to what the community wanted, not just what we thought they might want. And then really important to my summer was speaking with the apprentices, the staff, the community members, even the chickens at the farm, being able to build relationships and being in a space where people were really passionate about the same things that I was and about finding new ways to be creative about farming in order to improve health was really useful. And we moved beyond just the scope of the farm and its patrons, but also into WashU. This summer, we had the opportunity to invite a group of students from Spark, which is a sustainability training program at the Office of Sustainability. And this was really a full circle moment for me, being able to build bridges between WashU and also this great organization that I've been working with. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit now to St. Louis, why it matters that we're here. This is a city where food insecurity has very important impact. And so it's important to perhaps look for alternatives into where we can find food sources for people. So I'm going to introduce two terms that really ground in my project. So the first one is food apartheid. This is an emerging term that's starting to become used to replace the term food desert, which has been criticized for not really including the social roots of the issue of food insecurity. So food apartheid instead tries to focus on social issues, historical issues that have led to these lacks of access to food in given neighborhoods. And the second is food sovereignty. And this is the idea that people who consume foods and grow foods should have the right to control the systems of food production. And also includes the idea that people have the right to culturally appropriate food as well as the right to define their own agricultural systems. Now, in the context of food apartheid, we really wonder what can communities do to combat the issue of food insecurity. This is where urban farms can really play an important role. A lot of urban farms are multifaceted organizations. They can offer childcare, they can be associated with schools, with neighborhoods, and they can offer different kinds of health and community resources. These are 6 types of health. You might be wondering, how can urban farms interact with all of them? I think with physical, it's pretty obvious, healthy foods and exercise, but there's also more abstract types of health that we can interact with as an urban farm. So for example, Earth Dance had a series of plays for families that they held at their farm, and this could perhaps help with social and emotional types of health. And environmental health, creating green spaces in cities, can be really helpful. There's of course spiritual health. This is perhaps me as a farmer speaking, but I think it's hard to leave a green space without feeling a sense of serenity and connection to the earth. Okay, in the future, I hope to work in medicine. So this project has been really instrumental for me in order to redefine what health can really mean, what medicine can really mean. I think urban farming and the work that Earth Dance is doing can be viewed as a transgressive form of action against really harmful food systems that are currently in existence, and show how food can become medicine. Thank you.
Great job, wonderful job. All right. Next up, last but not least, Otto B. Bob and Jerry Virgil, Civic Scholar from Chicago, is double major in economics and political science in the College of Arts and Sciences. His project focused on improving data fluency among the social sector and nonprofit staff in St. Louis. He helped develop the Recognizing Diversity in Data Micro-Credential with the St. Louis Federal Reserve and Data Science module for the Social Impact Initiative. So with that.
Do I even have to present? That was pretty much. Oh, I was going to say. Yeah. So as Dwayne noted, I'm Otto, and I spent the summer working with the Data Science for Social Impact Initiative out of the Brown School and the Social Policy Institute, really focusing on 2 projects, both of which centered on data. One focusing on economic data with the St. Louis Fed, and the other focusing on local St. Louis data, statewide data, as well as national data. So this all gets its start back in 2020. It's the pandemic. I'm out there enumerating door to door with the US Census Bureau and really thinking about this question, where did these data go? So I'm collecting these data, but what happens with that? So that kind of was the spark for this whole project that led into sorting through lots of different data sources. So you've got national sources, you've got statewide sources, and you've got local sources, all of which provide different information to people in social sector and nonprofit organizations within St. Louis, but also, of course, around the country. So the point of this project this summer was to kind of sift through this and develop this model, focusing on what these different data sources can offer to people doing this really important work in nonprofits, how you use national data that includes statewide and local data, how you can look to the state of Missouri and see what kind of resources are out there that are put together by the state, and also thinking about what resources exist in St. Louis. This manifested itself in online modules. These launched earlier this month through the Social Policy Institute and really focus and center community members. So they really look towards social sector staff around the country and say, why are you using these data? Why does data matter for you? A large part of my project was putting together these guides, so accessing data in St. Louis. So using and kind of diving into a lot of these different resources that exist, going step by step through screenshots, looking at how these can be used, looking at how different folks have used them in the past. And going into this a little more, these are looking at geographies, so the St. Louis City government puts out a lot of data. What topics are covered by these data? If you're looking at the main website, what are the ways that you can kind of cut this bridge and cut this runway for understanding how to use these data and how to use them more effectively? Second piece, focusing on recognizing data or diversity in data, and this is through the St. Louis Fed, so thinking about economic data, thinking about income inequality, gender gaps, as well as racial gaps that exist. So there are a lot of different data out there that are economically related, and really focusing on how we can disaggregate those. So for example, visualizing racial gaps, this is the module that's openly, freely accessible for anyone who wants to take it online. Thinking about economic or racial gaps in economic data, hands-on practice using FRED, which is the Federal Reserve Economic Data. So for example, you have unemployment. So we all know unemployment spiked during the pandemic in 2020. This is the typical chart that you see thinking about unemployment up near 15%, and then kind of this decline over time down to near record lows, back to near pre-pandemic levels. What you don't necessarily see with this is when you break out unemployment data by race, there are kind of some racial groups that are lagging behind the aggregated national unemployment rate. So the black unemployment rate has remained higher than the white unemployment rate and the national unemployment rate. So this is really important for social sector groups working on employment and thinking about these kinds of things. Moving forward, it's really important that people in St. Louis are using and kind of thinking about these resources, working with additional nonprofits to get their feedback, incorporate additional data sources that I might have missed or that they want to include or that are being developed right now. Broader implementation throughout the Midwest. So thinking about not just St. Louis, but this can serve as a model for other states, other cities around the country that are, there are social sector groups in every state, in every city. So what can these other organizations take from the work that I've done and how can they implement them locally or at a statewide level? And finally, of course, you have broader policy implications. So, we saw a lot of data disaggregation and data collection during COVID-19. If Congress and state legislatures, put into the legislation and future funding for future programs, either funded or unfunded mandates to ensure that data are collected, that's really essential. And kind of these final thoughts, similar to what a lot of folks have been talking about today, is that community really makes this possible, and I couldn't have done this without the folks up here and also in the room. I learned a lot from being in St. Louis this summer that, it's a summer that I'll remember for the rest of my life, and really making sure that everyone was involved was central. So thank you.
All right, get your questions ready. Invite the group on up.
Such a bad picture.
All right, what questions do we have? Any questions via Zoom by chance? Question. Oh, there we go.
I have a question for Kyra. Yeah. So you mentioned there are some ideas that you would have liked to do that you didn't end up doing. I'm curious if you are willing to share some of those and maybe how you want to implement them in your future work.
Yeah, so it's definitely more, I would say, in this collaborative process with the Institute, who were lovely to work with. But I would say it was more about, thoughts that I had that kind of working within the institution, there were limits that we couldn't go, whether it was funding, they have to follow their grant regulations. So kind of, I think that, you know, there's so little research on what works for refugee and immigrant youth mental health that I think that going outside of the bounds that we currently have is necessary, because clearly what we have, it's not great. So I kind of wish that I could have pushed that a little bit further, done some more of that creativity exploration. But it was definitely just working with the partner was fantastic, but I would love to explore working with their arts organizations all around the world that work with, you know, students in refugee camps and explore different sorts of creativity practices. And that's something that I would have liked to get into a little bit more, but that's something that I think I will have to go partner to partner. There's just different institutions that do that, but yeah, thank you.
I was actually going to ask something kind of similar, but you mentioned there was some imposter syndrome, and I was wondering, you know, if that's something that others might have felt in this role, and if you could just dig into that a little bit more about that experience.
Yeah, before I pass this over, I will definitely say the people that I worked with at the International Institute were so amazing. And as I said, they're so overworked and underfunded that when I came to them and I said, I want to do a project with you, they basically said, great, come to us with whatever you want and we'll do it. Which, you know, obviously there were limitations once I got there, but I was terrified. I have no qualifications in psychology, in working with youth. I'm a student. So working with a community where you're going to have an impact like that is really scary because you don't want to do the wrong thing and you don't want to do more harm than good. And so there was definitely some imposter syndrome going in, working with people who have been in the industry for 25 years, and me coming in as a student just with a few ideas to try something new is really scary, but I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think joining any community that you're not a part of can be scary, and it's important to do it the right way to not cause any harm. And so I think for me and my project, I really focused on we'd do shopping field trips where students got to use money and they'd plan like budgeting and like shopping. And so I made sure to shop in like local communities so I could get to know the community more and it would be more related to the students, which I think helped me like get through that. And then parents would come along through that too. So then it was a good way to like connect with the community for me.
I would say also, I mean, I was working a lot with data, but working a lot with communities of people who use data on a regular basis. And a lot of kind of the DSSI slogan is, you know, everyone is a data person. So whether or not you're the primary person in your organization that's tasked with handling data-related things, or if you're just someone who, you know, works with spreadsheets all day, but, you know, your role isn't primarily data. So I was learning a lot from kind of what the social sector looks like in relationship to how people are interacting with different sources online, and really taking that and infusing that into the work that I was doing. So a lot of learning that took place, but also, you know, I didn't know a lot about everything that I was doing before I started, so it was a lot of learning for me too.
I think those have been really great points, and I'll add on like one tiny thing. I was lucky that at Earth Dance, there's already kind of an existing framework for internships and people to come into that. But of course, it was still really intimidating to be like, I have an idea, can I join? I think what's helped me a lot personally when it comes to imposter syndrome is kind of remembering like all these people who started these community organizations, they also all started from zero. And it's just a matter of like people coming together and starting all these organizations. Like everyone started with one idea. You know, maybe they didn't even have expertise in the field, but by bringing in people who do know about it and learning about it, it just helped me like relax a little bit when it came to being intimidated.
Yeah, I'm curious for what you all, and I would ask that of the other group too. What do you want to be when you grow up from what you learned from this work? Are you, any of you taking it into the future? Besides just learning how to work as a group, but are any of you taking this work and saying, I want to go do this as a career?
I mean, I can start. I mean, yeah, I'm going to be a math teacher, and I also am now considering like a PhD in math or math education, because I've done a lot of research in education, and I think this summer was really impactful for that because I'd have like a 40-minute drive commute there, and so on the way back I'd just be so happy. So it was like really reinforced the idea of wanting to do that as a career, and then possibly it's cool to have the website to just continue to add on throughout my career, and then if I continue to do research.
Okay. Yeah, that is my most terrifying question. I don't know what I want to do as a job, but I will say working with these students at the Institute is by far the most fulfilling experience I've ever had. And I think that one thing that this experience was great for is it maybe didn't tell me exactly what I want to do, but it did help cancel out a few factors along the way. So, you know, I learned some of the difficulties of working within such a large institution that is funded by the government and versus working with a grassroots NGO, things like that. So it definitely gave me some more experience in the matter, but I can't tell you what I want to do.
I've always answered this question the same way from the time I was 3, and that's I want to be Buzz Lightyear when I grow up. But in all seriousness, I think a lot of what I did this summer relates to skills and to skill building, and I don't necessarily know if I'll be a primary data person doing this kind of work in a social sector organization, but I know that I'll have the skills and the ability to kind of, you know, look at an issue and say, well, where can we find the data? Go out there and explore, developing those competencies to really, you know, tackle those large issues, and then have the understanding and ability to look out and say, you know, there's data missing here, so that can be something that we can improve upon, or this is where these data are located, let's understand them and implement them into the work that I end up doing.
Yeah, I'm trying to become a doctor. The application cycle is currently sucking the soul out of me. But I do hope to, you know, go into public health in some domain. I think for me, I don't know if it's going to be urban farming, but doing community-based work as a doctor and like kind of reinventing what health interventions can look like would be the ultimate goal.
Good answers.
Racquel, I had more of a suggestion than a question. One of the impressive programs at Washington University in recent years has been how the faculty in the biology department has worked very effectively to improve the quality of science education in high schools across the region. I was impressed by your project and the results you're finding, you're accomplishing. And it raises in my mind, how can that be spread across the St. Louis region to all students taking mathematics? And one way to do it, and this is my suggestion to you and maybe Stephanie to the Institute, is to take the idea of making this a project to the math department and the psychology department of Washington University and have them take this on the way the biology department did.
Yeah.
So I just suggest in seriousness that you consider that.
Yeah, thank you so much. I didn't know that about the biology department, so I think that's really cool and something I'll definitely look into.
The person you want to talk to is Stephanie, what's her name?
Vicki May.
Vicki May, yes.
Institute for School Partnership,
Okay.
ISP.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much. That's really
And they do
cool.
math too. They do math too.
Okay.
It's a science engaging.
Not in this area. Not in the area that she's studying.
Well, maybe not that part, if they do work
But
with
this is
that.
this is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I'll definitely look into that because I really like that idea. I think that's the whole goal. Like, how do you start this? So, thank you. Yeah.
We don't have a slide for tomorrow.
You're right.
It's okay. All right.
Well, I wanted to sort of give a closing remark that mirrors my opening one, which I think this is a room full of cheerleaders and champions for all of our 16 Civic Scholars, or 151 Civic Scholars. I know I see a parent in the room, I believe, yes, and some junior Civic Scholars and, faculty and staff from across campus, but I wanted to give a specific shout out. You may have noticed in the introductions or in the program that our Civic Scholars are named scholars, and so some of those donors who contribute to the Gephardt Institute and the Civic Scholars Program are here tonight. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Maxine and Bob over there. Yes. And Bob Virgil back there. And John and Crystal Berline back there. So thank you all so much. So yeah, thank you for investing in our scholars, both past, current, and future, and for everyone for being here. And I'll leave it to Dwayne to make some things.
I just want to say that I love how we talked about civic engagement is different from what we thought it would be at the beginning and how it turns out now. And what you heard was 8 different ways to do civic engagement, and it shows up differently. But it shows up in community, it shows up in learning, and it shows up in opportunity. And as more we talk about the opportunity that's available to impact the community, the more you see the synergy and the enthusiasm and the passion to make sure that actually happens. So let's not leave this space thinking that we just saw a presentation and great, but let's leave this space understanding that the passion, the opportunity is to continue it and make sure it's sustainable as we continue to move forward. And one thing that we can do is come back tomorrow to hear 8 more possibilities and opportunities. So with that, thank you very much.